speak.
Exactly right. Well, I've just started the recording again so that anyone who missed a few minutes will be able to catch up later. Karen, please feel free to jump back into where you were.
So thanks. I'd like to say about the book of Ruth that Ruth is considered the first Gioret, that is the first, like the model of a person converting to Judaism. She's very much revered. She's very much seen as a model to imitate and to like someone to follow her, to walk in her footsteps. Unfortunately, you might say that in Israel today, the whole issue of joining Judaism is very complex, and not necessarily do we accept the people who say, yes, your people is my people, and I'd like to join the Jewish people and become one of you. We're not as tolerant as the book of Ruth might suggest. Although, if you read carefully in between the lines, you would notice that when they arrive to Bethlehem, the women of town are all talking and are amazed, but they're only talking about Naomi. They say, oh, this is not the Naomi that we remembered. Some interpreters suggest that they are so much in awe and amazement because they see Ruth and they know that she's a Moabite, and they know about the decree that says that the children of Israel should not mix with Moabites. Only towards the end of the book, when there's another scene of all the women of Bethlehem joining together, do they acknowledge Ruth as one of their own. But again, they don't acknowledge her in and of herself, but they acknowledge her as the person who gave Naomi a son. And they tell her, your daughter-in-law is better than 7 sons. So again, from a certain perspective, when you read in between the lines of the Megillah, you could suggest that Ruth is not necessarily accepted wholeheartedly. Whichever way you see it, the Megillah does suggest the extent to which we're willing to accept a person who is the other, that is not necessarily like us or similar to us. I'll make a brief stop in my talk, and I'd like to invite you to share some of your immigration stories. And when I'm talking about immigration, it can be either from the United States to Israel, from one state in the United States to another state of the United States. For example, those of you who came to Pittsburgh from a different state, you're welcome to share. And I'll be quiet now, so whoever wants to be first is invited to do so. Yeah, Elisheva.
I don't have an immigration story, but I have a question about whether not mentioning Ruth implies that she is not accepted. Naomi is a person they knew. She comes back bereft of her husband and sons. Daughters-in-law were not really important people. They, she's a tag-along. Until later things happen, there's no reason for them to mention her. And I suspect that's more why she's not mentioned than that they had any issues about, especially a Moabite, joining the tribe, if you will. She's simply a daughter-in-law. Daughters-in-law didn't much count. They also didn't live long, given the death rate in birth. They're really not important people in the structure of the family and tribe.
One interpretation, by the way, for the reason why Ruth is not mentioned in the end is because of the suggestion that she died giving birth. However, talking about women empowerment, if you will, although she's not mentioned, she's not mentioned at the end, besides being the daughter-in-law of Naomi and the great grandmother of King David, the whole book is named after her. So it's not as if she's completely erased.
No, of course. But we have named the book about Ruth because we have a message we want to take from her. But if you're looking at Naomi's neighbors and relatives, they don't have the same agenda we did in naming the book.
You could argue that, I would suggest that there are different voices in the Megillah, because when you see the discussion between Boaz and the other potential redeemer, says that he's willing to redeem the land. But once Boaz tells him, if you redeem the land, you should also redeem the daughter-in-law, that is, so that he will have a son to carry his name, then the other redeemer says, no, I don't want to. Why don't I want to take her? Because it might contaminate my bloodline. So in a sense,
he also has to name his first son for her dead husband. Doesn't become his son.
Yeah,
and
but then
his line. This is always a sticking point with levirate redeemers.
But why does he suggest that it might contaminate his bloodline? Some interpreters suggest it's because she's a Moabite. That is, despite the fact that she converted, it's like sort of they keep remembering her roots. And that's another suggestion. And only then Boaz can become the redeemer, because he's sort of the more distant relative.
Well, since there isn't a remaining brother to perform the levirate marriage, they have to go further.
It actually does not say anywhere that she has converted. It doesn't.
No, but the words, your people is my people.
Yes, the word is
your God, my God.
In fact, there is a suggestion that is accepting upon herself, but that the people have not actually accepted her as a converted, as a Jew. Naomi has accepted her, and until Boaz actually marries her, does the chalitza and marries her, she's not actually accepted in the community.
Can I take this in a slightly different direction? I was thinking about stories of immigration, of the ways people move across lands, and even that question of sort of acceptance that Hannah, you're mentioning, right? If you'll forgive me, I'm going to put it in the chat. I gave this sermon about 1.5 years, 2 years ago. It was right before I came to visit. I had just gone to the United States' southern border to meet people and to explore what was happening at our southern border, the United States' southern border. I was in El Paso and in Juarez. And what I found to be fascinating about that was the sort of shared stories we tell about having to move or feeling forced to move from one place to another. In the case of Ruth and Naomi, we're talking about, the family circumstances have changed significantly enough that they need different support. I put in that piece a number of other examples coming from the Torah itself about movement from place to place, the stories of of Jewish people from all over, and how that these stories very much mirrored the experiences of the people that I was meeting in Juarez and in El Paso. And also just reflecting on my own story. Three of my four grandparents were born outside the United States. My father was born outside the United States. Immigration is such a built-in story, certainly for many people in the United States, certainly for many Jews, certainly for me personally. And I always find, even if you don't take the narrative of conversion, which is certainly its own complicated piece, but just the narrative of how we move as individuals from place to place to place to place, there's so much shared there. I think when people start sharing that story more regularly, I find that there's a lot of resonance that happens. So anyway, that's just my own sort of response to what Karen, you were asking much before.
So thank you for returning us to the personal narratives of immigration, or as you nicely put it, our reasons for moving from one place to another. Anyone else would like to share their story?
Well, I can also share.
Wait, Hannah, would you like to start? I think Hannah and Don, you were speaking together.
Yeah, but Don was saying
so choose
that he
who
wants
goes
to ask
first.
a question.
I just have a question.
Don.
Yeah.
It just occurred to me, the word ger in Hebrew is, we use it for convert, but we also use it for foreigner. And as we expand that word, mahagel, hagel, it connects with the idea of immigration. The ger is someone who comes from a different country, a different culture, a different place. And hagira is even falls, that even comes into hajira, that comes into Arabic and stuff. I'm just questioning whether or not that's phonetic, or I don't know what's the word, from the standpoint of the origin of the word itself. Is that are these things connected? I mean, that's a question I have. Is there a basis to that? That there's the ger itself
etymological cognates is what you want to know.
Oh yeah, that's okay. We need the English teacher to get this straight. Yeah. So is the word ger connected with the word hagira, immigration?
Well, Donit is said that gerim hayinu, ger hayinu be'eretz Mitzrayim. We were
Right.
gerim.
No, but I think he's asking whether there's an
etymological
connection between ger and hagira.
Ger and hagira, okay?
Well,
so we were mehagrim.
Yeah, I'm saying it because it came to me as we were just discussing this thing about Ruth, because Ruth was a ger. Ruth was a ger because she had come from this other place, and the Torah talks a lot about not abusing the ger, not abusing the foreigner, as long as they of course have to accept all our laws and customs. But when you say that Ruth wasn't a ger, she was a ger, but she didn't. It may be that the word, the etymology of the word itself came from Ruth.
In a sense, it could. I mean, first of all, about the etymology, what I suggest is that I'll look it up and then I'll post it on Facebook, because it's an interesting question, and I'm not that familiar with the etymological roots of hagira, so I'll check that. If you look at it from the perspective of personal experience, many immigrants